What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to implement a cash flow forecasting system for your nonprofit. So if you're having some trouble trying to figure out the timing of your payments, the timing of when donations are going to come in, how to manage the inflows and outflows that are happening within your bank accounts, then you want to stay tuned because I'm going to walk you through a system that's going to help you manage your cash flow now and for the future. So keep watching. First off, if you're new here, my name is Jermaine. I am the owner of Visionary Accounting Group, where we support nonprofit organizations in their accounting function. We offer retainer services as well as a monthly membership for organizations that want to improve how they're managing their accounting. If they want to improve their fiscal operations, you can find all of that here. So today we're going to be talking about cash flow forecasting because it is super duper important. One of the main reasons I would actually venture to say that cash flow forecasting is actually more important for nonprofits is because your income can be very unpredictable, right? I'd say those who have earned income where you have more control over whether it's like a product or a service that you might be selling outside of contributed income, then you might be able to stabilize your income a bit better just because you have some control. But for many, the income is coming from outside sources, donors, right? Grants, government contracts. And so a lot of times there are a lot of factors that affect your ability to get paid and when you get paid. And so that's why cash flow forecasting is going to be super important. First reason it's important is financial stability, right? So it can help you to plan, right, for your cash movements, especially when money is super tight, right? Ensuring that you can meet things like payroll, ensuring you can pay certain vendors, right? Meet certain expense obligations, and making sure that you can continue to fund your programs without interruption. Cash flow forecasting also helps you to make better decisions, right? So when you understand how your cash is flowing in and out of your organization, you can make more informed decisions about when to spend, when to save, when to delay payments, because we have to be honest. Sometimes we have to hold off on certain things. We don't have to jump up every time we get a bill. Sometimes we have to strategically determine how we're going to let cash flow out of the organization. And then of course for grant management, right? Specifically tied to timeliness. Sometimes you have to spend money, in order to be paid back by these grants. Sometimes you have to spend in a certain way in order to then, right, meet certain milestones to get your next, funding deposit. And so all of these are key areas that you're thinking about managing as you're determining how to structure your cash flow. Okay, so let's talk about some key components of cash flow forecasting. So first, of course, you always want to start with your income. So we're talking about what are your just regular income sources? What are the income sources that you 9 times out of 10 know are pretty stable in your organization or that you're expecting to receive, right? Then you also want to include any kind of grants and special funds. Special meaning maybe it's a one-time, donations, maybe any kind of income that you think is less predictable. You also want to include that. Now, I want to just caveat and say, I'm talking through this now, but before the video is over, I'm actually going to share with you one of the templates that we use and just kind of show you how we're tracking for some of our clients. The next component you want to think about are expenses, right? So you want to have those in 2 buckets, so like what are fixed, what are variable. So your fixed expenses, things like your salaries, rent and utilities if you have an actual facility, but if you don't, things like insurance, anything that is not changing for the most part, like month to month, right? Anything that's going to occur regularly. Then you want to think about your variable expenses, things that are tied to programming, maybe fundraising, any expenses that are typically fluctuating over time. The next piece you want to think about is timing, understanding when funds are likely to come in, understanding when key payments have to be made. So one of the actual cash flow doc that I'm going to show you is a monthly one, but we have for organizations who are experiencing tighter cash restraints. We're doing it on a rolling basis and it's week to week, right? Usually like 13-week rolling. The type that you'll need, of course, will be dependent on your organization. It'll be dependent on your cash position. But typically when we're thinking about the timing, when we're building out that cash flow forecast, we're thinking about, okay, when is payroll typically coming out? Do you have a lawyer or a retainer that's being paid, every month? Or is it variable where it's based off of the hours that they bill you for that month? So maybe we can't guesstimate what the recurring amount is going to be, but we can, kind of estimate based off of past bills what around about an average, maybe. Depending on whether you go monthly or whether you go weekly will kind of determine the level of detail you're going to need. But another thing that I want you to think about also is, like, we're talking about key components. We talked about income, expenses, timing. The other thing I want you to think about is releasing. So a lot of times if you are spending like restricted funds, you need to account for maybe you didn't receive money in this particular period, but you received this money previously and now you're releasing it. You want to make sure that that is clearly indicated. And then of course, any cash reserves, right, that can be used for any of the unexpected expenses that come up or any critical cash constraints that you may experience. You might want to indicate that you have cash reserves in this flowcast. And so that is like the bones of it. And so now we're going to get into the steps that you can take to actually create the forecast. Step one is by far going to be gathering your historical data, right? By collecting past data, you can set up a baseline for your forecast. I think people get hung up on the fact, like, I don't know how much it's gonna cost. I don't know when they're gonna charge me. Take a look at what's happened in the past. It's a forecast. You think of it in the same way you think about a budget. It's estimating. It's not going to be exact, but it is giving you something to look at, to think through, and to plan for. And so you want to collect that historical data because it's going to show you trends in your income and expenses. It's going to help you predict future cash flow patterns. Like, this is going to help you set the baseline. Of course, I hope that you're using some sort of accounting system, so naturally you'd be able to pull that data, but if not, you might have to go old school and pull actual bank statements, maybe if you have past audited financials. However, the best way is going to be to run the reports right in your accounting software, right? So if we were in QuickBooks Online, which is our accounting software of choice, I'd look at over the last 12 months, right? I'd look at the P&L by month. What's been happening, right? What has been steady? Where have there been spikes? Because I want to dig into that. Was this a one-time thing, or is this, an event that happens every year? So I need to be thinking about that as I'm building out, the next cash flow, right? These are things to consider. Next, you want to be thinking about your income and then categorizing that income, right? So what's recurring, you want to think about monthly donations. If you have like a recurring giving program, you want to think about, do you have membership dues, program fees, government grants, or funding from foundations that is pretty consistent? You want to group it. Honestly, I would say you want to think about how you group the income on your financials and use those same categories. That's what we do. It's rather easy. Next, of course, you're listing out your expenses. We talked about, thinking about through fixed, variable, and making sure, now this is also aesthetics, right? So you can make sure if you want that fixed are grouped together, variable are grouped together. Honestly, I don't really care about aesthetics. I just want to make sure we have all the information in one place, right? And then we talked about timing previously, but now we're getting detail and we're actually mapping out the timing, right? So when you're looking at your spreadsheet, inputting, when do you expect each of these income sources to hit and about how much? When are these expected expenses going to occur, right? Some might be monthly, quarterly, annually. You need to be plugging it in, right? Depending on, of course, you have to consider, like, if you're looking at it weekly or monthly. If it's weekly, you're not so much looking at the big picture, you're looking at the immediate picture. However, if you're doing monthly, you can kind of plan a little bit more in that quarterly, annually range as well. And then you want to include or think about seasonal adjustments, right? So are there certain times of the year that you're having events? Are there certain times of the year where funding is slow or where you expect to get, an advance from your contracts? Like, you want to think about those things and you want to include them. And so I know that it can be very, like your mind might be going as you're thinking of all of the different areas. And so that's why I want to actually show you what this looks like. And so we're going to go on screen and I'm going to walk you through what one of the templates that we use looks like. And why I say one of, it's because it depends on the organization. So we have different templates that we pull on because it speaks to the specific situation that your organization may be in. You're hearing me say templates. If you're new here, maybe you don't know. And if you're not new here, you've probably heard me talk about it. Our Accounting for Good membership. It is a monthly membership for new or first time executive directors, those who are truly looking for support as they build out and manage their accounting operations. We offer templates. So this template that I'm going to be walking you through is actually in there. We offer monthly master classes. We have monthly Q&As, and you have a board where you can ask questions and where you not only get my answers, my expertise directly to your questions, but you also get, the community aspect, right? The other executive directors who are in there who can speak to their experience and give you ideas and give you answers on some of the issues or questions you just may have in your organization. So if you know that you need a little bit more hands-on, that just watching these videos is not enough, then I implore you to come over and join us in the Accounting for Good membership. This is monthly. Some of this may not make sense from a numbers standpoint. I didn't want to show you just the template because it would have been difficult for you to really see what's happening here. And so I used an old one and kind of just changed up the numbers. But this is an organization that is choosing to do their forecast by months. Let's change this. It more so aligns with, let's say, if you were looking at it at the beginning of the year, January through June. You can see here is where we're breaking out revenue and expenses. So in this case, this organization has previously received restricted funding, and so they are spending some of that restricted funding, which is what's up here. But then they also have some contributed income that does not have donor restrictions. Then they have some earned income that comes from contracts, and then they just have some other. Typically, this is like random, maybe somebody donated, $50 here, $100 here, but it's not something that's recurring. But of course, you want to capture any income that has come in. This could be interest income, right? So that kind of miscellaneous stuff that doesn't need to really be called out. When we go down to the expenses, right? Now, we've grouped these because we don't want to be so detailed, right? This is just meant to give us just bird's eye view so that we can just think through where we might have some pitfalls or where we might even have a surplus, maybe, because maybe we need to think about what we need to do with that income, right? Here we have salaries and benefits. For the most part, we know that is pretty much like a fixed expense, except in the months where, the organization might be hiring someone. This organization was on a hiring spree. So you see salaries and benefits started to easily just go up month over month. So whereas typically salaries and benefits is usually, more of a fixed expense, in this case, we could actually consider it variable because we know that over the first couple of months in the year, right, they're looking to hire. And so we know that it's not really going to be steady. Communications and marketing, another variable expense. Professional services. Now, this can be a mix of variable and fixed expenses. Of course, you have to think about what your organization is paying out because this here consists of maybe the lawyer on retainer, the accountant on retainer, but then maybe it's like a marketing consultant that you brought on only for, 1 month out of the year, but it was just a one-time expense. So thinking through that. And then you have your office costs, fundraising. And again, these are expense categories that are important and specific to this organization. You need to do the same for yours. You might look on here and say, we don't have conference and meeting costs. And if that's the case, it shouldn't be on here. Insurance payments. This is a great example. Starts off either where there's none or it's a little fluctuating, but then we see May and June, same amount, that caused us to think, okay, do we start stabling out there? Can I expect that this is going to be the payment for the rest of the year, right? And then they have events, equipment, and then other. We're totaling up our income, we're totaling up our expenses, right? And then of course we have the net. What's important to note is that this line up here isn't always what you received in that period. You might have received this money previously, but it is money that is covering expenses in this period. And so, for example, this organization, as you can see, the expenses and what was released are the exact same amount. So one can deduce here is that they're using restricted income to pay for whatever expenses they had in January. However, they also got some other income though this month. So kudos to them, right? And so forth and so on. This is just the breakdown of that. When you're putting these numbers in, this is what I was talking about, thinking through like what income you're expecting to receive and what expenses you have, because that's what get plugged in here. And remember, this is a working document. So there are times where this column might have been completely blank with the exception of like salaries and maybe professional services, the things that we knew the organization was going to have. But maybe the further along we got into the year, we're like, oh, we know what's coming up in June. Now we can plug those things in. Or maybe we don't know, completely, but we know that there are some upcoming expenses that we're expecting to have, and this is how I'm going to estimate it. Because the goal is to just see what's happening. It could be the case that, let's say something like this is happening where we know how much we're releasing in June, but we have no other income coming in, and we see, oh, huge deficit, right? This is where we call on the fact that, okay, well, we know in January we received these monies that didn't need to be spent just yet because all of January's expenses were covered by released revenues. We have some other released revenues that are covering expenses in other months. So maybe we can draw on some of these incomes to cover the deficit we're potentially going to have in June, right? But you won't know that if you're not looking at this, right? You have to be able to play around with it. Because that's the other thing too, is like scenarios. So you might get this and you might start playing around like, if we lost this contract for the rest of the year, what does that look like? What happens then? So it also helps with like scenario planning. Now, here's the other part that we like to add to the cash flow forecast. We're summing up all the actuals, right? So all that's in this column K is just a summation of what's happening in column C through H. Column L, however, is the budget. This is the organization's budget, and then we're drawing a variance between total actuals and then the budget, because this is just letting us know where we're falling in relation to the budget. Are we, over or under anywhere? You see here, this is red because we have expenses in this line. What's this? An office cost, but there's no budget for this. And so immediately we need to dig into that and determine why, right? Budget is $6,000, but already for insurance payments, we're over. Why, right? And some of this is not so much that it's a negative or it's a bad thing, but this is what causes you to have questions. This is what causes you to dig into things. And so you have to be looking in order to know what you need to be considering, what conversations you need to be having, maybe what you need to be escalating up to management or the board. And so, yeah, this is just a quick little overview. I hope that this was helpful. And again, this template is available in our membership. I hope that didn't overwhelm you. I hope that it really got your wheel spinning on what your cash flow forecasting could look like. I even hope it might have told you, maybe you need to be in that membership because we would love to have you. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop them down in the comment section, and I will see you guys in the next video.